I never should have gone into the woods that night. But when you're young, you feel invincible, like you've got all the answers. My buddies and I had been joking about the old forest at the edge of our small town. People said it was haunted or something. Naturally, we decided to check it out, just for kicks, you know? The sun had just dipped under the horizon when we hopped the fence and entered the forest. Tom, Jenna, and Mark, my best friends since childhood, were all grins and laughs. We had flashlights, but it was still hard to see. Trees loomed like giants, casting weird shadows all around. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No sounds of cars, no barking dogs, just us and the forest. As we moved deeper, Jenna pulled out her phone and started filming. "Gonna make us YouTube famous," she giggled. That's when we saw it. A circle of stones ahead, surrounded by weird markings on the ground. The air felt heavy, like it was full of static electricity. I couldn't explain it, but I felt uneasy. "Guys, maybe we should head back," I said, my voice shaky. "Come on, don't be a wimp," Mark chuckled, stepping into the circle. Suddenly, everything went dark. I mean, pitch black. Our flashlights flickered and died, and Jenna's phone shut off. We couldn't see a thing. "Did you guys feel that?" Tom whispered. "Like a gust of cold air?" "Yeah," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "Something's not right." Then, from somewhere in the darkness, we heard chanting, low, guttural voices that seemed to come from all around us. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This was seriously messed up. "Who's there?" Mark shouted. No answer, just the chilling chants getting louder. My heart was pounding, and I just knew we had to get out of there. "Guys, grab hands. We need to stick together and find our way back," I said, reaching out blindly. We found each other's hands, formed a chain, and started to move. We hadn't gone far when a light appeared in the circle of stones behind us. It glowed brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding, even from a distance. "Run!" I screamed. We sprinted through the dark, stumbling over roots and branches. It felt like the forest was alive, trying to trap us. But the light was gaining on us, flickering between the trees like a wild animal. Finally, we saw the fence up ahead, the edge of the forest. But the light was right behind us now, so close I could feel its heat. With a burst of energy, we leapt over the fence and landed hard on the other side. The light vanished the moment we crossed the fence, like it couldn't follow us. We were gasping for air, too freaked out to speak. We looked back at the forest, half expecting to see someone or something come out after us. But there was nothing, just the dark, silent trees. We made a pact that night to never speak of what happened, to never go back to that forest. But even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that we disturbed something we shouldn't have. Sometimes, late at night, I hear chanting outside my window, and I wonder if whatever was in that forest is still out there, watching, waiting for a chance to finish what it started. Yeah, I never should have gone into those woods. And if you're smart, you'll stay away too. Some things are better left undisturbed, locked away in the dark corners of the world, just waiting for the next group of foolish kids to stumble upon them.
I've always been the adventurous type. You know, the one who would always dare to step off the beaten path just to see where it led. So, when we moved to the small town of Mistwood, the endless stretch of forest behind our new house was like an unopened treasure chest. "Be careful out there, Sarah. People say it's easy to get lost," Mom warned. But parents always say that, right? I spent weeks exploring, creating my own maps, and marking interesting spots. Until one day I found it, the circle. It was perfect, like someone had taken a giant compass and drawn it on the ground. But what was even weirder was the stone altar in the center. Now, I've seen enough movies to know that stumbling upon a stone altar in the middle of a forest isn't exactly a good sign. Still, curiosity got the better of me. That evening, I mentioned it to Mr. Johnson, the old man who lived next door. His face went pale as soon as the words left my mouth. "Some things are better left alone, young lady," he mumbled, quickly changing the subject. So, obviously I had to go back. I mean, wouldn't you? I told myself that I'd just take a few pictures, maybe look for some clues about who put it there. The sky was overcast that evening, the forest darker than usual. I'd brought a flashlight, but somehow I didn't want to turn it on. The circle was easy to find, almost as if it was calling me. The altar seemed different, though. The stones looked darker, almost charred. Had someone been here? I was pondering this when I heard it. A soft chant in a language I couldn't understand. My heart pounding, I crouched behind a tree. Through the gaps in the foliage, I saw them. Hooded figures forming a circle around the altar. They had candles, and the flickering light gave their robes an eerie glow. The chant grew louder, filling the air with a sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin. Should I run? Should I call for help? Thoughts raced through my mind, but my body wouldn't move. Then one of the figures stepped into the center of the circle. He, or she, I couldn't tell, held up a small object that glinted in the candlelight. And then they saw me. I don't know how, but they did. All at once, their heads turned in my direction. Time seemed to freeze. I bolted, my legs suddenly springing to life, carrying me faster than I'd ever run before. I heard them behind me, their footsteps heavy and relentless. I couldn't see. I couldn't think. I could only run. Trees, rocks, everything was a blur. And then I tripped. As I tumbled to the ground, my flashlight flew out of my hand and smashed against a tree. I was plunged into darkness. Scrambling to my feet, I waited for them to grab me. But nothing happened. No footsteps, no chants, just the wind rustling through the trees. I took a deep breath, my heart still racing. I finally turned on my backup flashlight and made my way back home, stumbling more than once. When I got there, I locked all the doors and windows, as if that would keep out whatever I'd seen. I never told anyone about that night. Who would believe me? But I also never went back to that circle. Some things are better left alone after all. Days turned into weeks, and life in Mistwood went on. But things were different. The forest no longer felt inviting. It felt like a dark void that I didn't dare explore. Even Mr. Johnson started avoiding me, as if he knew what I'd seen. Then one day, I found it. On my doorstep, just sitting there. A small object glinting in the morning light. It was a locket, old and tarnished. Inside was a picture of a girl, but her face was scratched out, unrecognizable. I threw it into the deepest part of the river that ran through the forest, watching as the water swallowed it whole. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. That circle, those people, they're still out there, and they know who I am. Sometimes, when the night is dark and the wind howls through the trees, I can still hear the chanting, soft but clear, and I know that they're calling me, that they've marked me as one of their own. I try not to listen, but some nights the curiosity burns brighter than the fear. I haven't gone back, not yet, but the forest is still there, waiting, and so are they. I've lived in this little town all my life, and there's a rule we all follow. Don't go into the forest after dark. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale, right? But no one ever questioned it. It was just something we knew, like knowing the sky is blue. But curiosity's a strong thing, you know? One night when the moon was full and the stars seemed brighter than usual, I got this itch. I had to know what was in there, why we weren't supposed to go. So I put on my boots, grabbed a flashlight, and snuck out of my house. Yeah, not the smartest thing I've ever done. The forest was different at night. The trees seemed taller, like they were reaching for something, and the air felt thicker, as if it was hiding secrets. I kept walking, my heart thumping in my chest like a drum. There was something electrifying about being where I wasn't supposed to be. And then I heard it. Voices whispering from deep within the forest. I froze, listening. The words were hard to make out, but they sounded rhythmic, like some kind of chant. My curiosity took over again. I had to see who it was. The flashlight's beam danced on the trees as I moved deeper into the forest, each step feeling heavier than the last. My gut was telling me to turn around, but I just couldn't. Finally, I reached a clearing, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A group of people stood in a circle, all wearing dark robes with their hoods up. In the center of the circle was an altar made from logs, and on it lay something, I couldn't see what, covered with a cloth. The people were still chanting, their voices low but urgent. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped the flashlight. I wanted to run, scream, do anything but stand there. But it was like my feet were glued to the ground. Suddenly, one of the figures stepped forward and raised their arms. The chanting stopped. The hood was lowered, and I gasped. It was Mrs. Thompson, my high school English teacher. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something. Fear, maybe, before her expression hardened. "What do we have here? A curious little mouse," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The other figures turned towards me, lowering their hoods. I recognized them all, people from town, even some from my church. My head was spinning. None of this made any sense. Mrs. Thompson walked over to the altar and pulled away the cloth, revealing a small wooden box. She opened it, and a chilling wind swept through the clearing. I couldn't see what was inside, but I didn't want to. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to get out of there. "You've disrupted a sacred ritual, my dear," she said, walking towards me. "We can't let you go, knowing what you know." I snapped out of it. My feet finally obeyed me, and I turned to run. But the group was quick. They started chanting again, this time louder, angrier. I felt a force pulling me back, my body growing heavier with each step. But I fought it, pushing myself to keep going. Branches whipped my face as I ran through the forest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop, didn't look back until I burst through the trees and into the open. My house was just ahead. I could make it. I reached my front door, threw it open, and slammed it shut behind me. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. My parents came running, concern turning to horror as I blurted out what had happened. We moved shortly after that night. Mom said it was for a job opportunity, but I knew better. We never talked about it, like it was a bad dream we all wanted to forget. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the stars are bright, I feel that itch again. An urge to go back, to confront them, to get answers. But then I remember the look in Mrs. Thompson's eyes and the voices in the forest. And I think, maybe, some secrets are better left alone.